Hello, and welcome to the very first Collingwood Magpie podcast that I will be recording. At the moment, the tentative title will be the Mad Magpie, but I'm open to suggestions. So if you can think of something a little bit more, I don't know, that rolls off the tongue, let me know in the comments below. Pretty open with the name of this one. Why am I recording a Collingwood podcast for you? I don't know about you, but when the weekend rolls around and you watch the match, afterwards I feel a bit empty, especially when with a Friday or a Thursday night game and you feel like all you want to do is talk more about the Magpies, and there's not a lot out there really. And as interesting as the other matches are, we all know that we're here for the Collingwood, so let's use this as an avenue on YouTube so that people can leave their comments, people can talk, people can give their ideas about how the team is going, and that way it just gives us another avenue to talk about the team that we all support. Last night, obviously, Collingwood had a pretty good match in which they defeated Hawthorn, and the score was 8 goals 11.59 to 3 goals 9.27. And as nice as it was to see Collingwood get a pretty easy win, dominating from the start till finish, I must say it wasn't one of my favourite matches that I've seen. And I think there are still a few issues that we need to sort out if we are to challenge for the premiership. And I'll talk about that a bit more when we get down the agenda to the ball use. Just a quick note on the background. Just grabbed a quick free animated background to put here. This is intended to be listened to, not so much watched. So if that annoys you, well, get over it. It's just there so it's not a black screen. So at the Giant Stadium in Sydney, two different Victorian teams playing together. That was a little bit interesting to see that. And it was good to see a few different fans were allowed in to watch the match. Collingwood got off to a pretty good start early, kicking goals, and Hawthorn really never showed up. It was interesting because I must say that whenever Collingwood plays the Hawks, I always have this pessimistic outlook that we're going to get strategically defeated. And I know in the media during the week there's been a few comments about how Alistair Clarkson has something like a 12-1 record against Nathan Buckley. And I know that we've all seen over the last few years Hawthorn teams that were clearly not as good as Collingwood still somehow managed to get a win. A bit like watching us versus GWS, to be honest. However, there was no strategy there from the Hawks that made you think, geez, we're in trouble here. They chipped the ball, they got lots of possessions, and they very rarely threatened the goals. In fact, if you watch the goals that they did kick, they were kind of lucky goals, you know. They had Isaac Smith get a pretty lucky kick out of a pack in the first quarter. They had a pack mark to McAvoy, who really shouldn't have been there. It was there because of injury, and it should have been spoiled through the goals anyway. So throughout the game, there was no point where I thought, oh, we're in trouble here. I think the Hawks have us. And their forward line looked pretty timid, to be honest. So I think given the amount of talk about Collingwood's ball use over the last few weeks, I'd be really looking at Hawthorn, because I think that we have a tendency to play slow, but the way they were playing, I haven't seen anything that useless is not the right word, but there was just nothing there to be worried about. And I think that's really unusual for a Clarkson team that, you know, a few weeks ago defeated Richmond, that usually has some kind of strategy that makes you sit down and go, okay, we're really going to have to think our way through this one. Highlight for me always every year is watching the new players come into the team, and I think everyone else would have been really excited to see that as well. And I'm going to struggle with the names here, so I'm just going to say Atu, Bozanuvalagi, and Will Kelly coming in for their first games last night. And I think both of them had signs that there are some potential there, especially Adu, who had some really clean hands, picked up the ball really well, attacked the ball at pace, and potentially could be more of a crumbing forward that we need. Will Kelly took a couple of good marks, kicked the first goal of the game, which is really exciting, but unfortunately looks to have some kind of arm injury. So we'll have to see how that pans out for the rest of the season. And I guess talking about the new players coming into the team, there's been a few changes. We also had Scharenberg, who's been in for a couple of weeks, replacing Jeremy Howe, and is probably one of my, not disappointing is not the right word, but one of the unluckiest players that I've seen at Collingwood. And I've always thought that he has this extreme talent and the ability to intercept mark, and his kicking is first class. And I really hope at some point over the next 12 to 18 months his body just stands up to the point where he can show how good of a player that he could be. And for me, of all the players coming in yesterday, the highlight was Isaac Quaynor. He had a fantastic match off the half back line, running really quick. His ball delivery is something really to watch. And at a few different points during the match last night, he would give a little kick, run past, take the handball, break through tackles, and then deliver really well. So I think realistically, Isaac Quaynor is someone that we need in our team. I think he gives us a little bit more run, and I really hope to see him in there for the next sort of 12 months without a break, unless, injury, some huge form issues. It's sort of nice to see a really good right-footed kick in our back line because we have so many lefties in there as well, and I feel like he gives us that dash that we need. And I know that Moore has that bit of dash about him, but he's also got to lock down a bit more. So I feel like Quaynor is a really big win from last night. And I feel like watching him, he just looks like that sort of player you're going to be watching for a long time. So hopefully he continues to impress with that. I thought that Tyler Brown was probably ready for a rest. I thought he started the year really well, and his best game was versus the Dogs, definitely. And since then, he's been in and out of matches. He does good things. And to be honest, his brother as well, he drifts in and out of matches. But Tyler was ready for a rest. I was really disappointed to see that Josh Dacos had been injured because he'd be one of our biggest improvers of the year. And I feel like he was ready to really break out. So I don't know too much about the injury. I haven't checked in on that yet, but I hope it's not a long one. I hope we get Josh Dacos back soon because I think he gives us some pace. I think he gives us some dare in our midfield. And I have been a long believer that our midfield is a little bit overhyped and we have some really good players in there, but I think we need a few people around them to really push them. I feel like Dacos could be one to break into that. I wanted to talk about our backline. And I think our backline are keeping us in it this year. And I think there is some fantastic players in there, even with Jeremy Howe out, which is a huge loss. I think he is pretty much, he was a lock for All-Australian. And I think Darcy Moore is a lock for All-Australian as well. I think those two are playing. Darcy is still playing some fantastic football, but Jeremy is underrated. And I know that the media talk about him a lot for his high marking, but I think they miss how big of a player he is in our backline. He has fantastic intercepting skills, and he also has fantastic delivery with his foot. But even still, if you go through man by man in our backline, you can't fault them at all. Darcy Moore, in my opinion, All-Australian form. You have Matty Scharenberg, who's playing quite well. You have Braden Maynard, who is probably having his best season ever. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit further down there, so I don't want to talk about him too much. You have Roughhead down back, who just does a job every week. There's player after player that we can mention, and they're all doing such a good job. So I think we have to probably for the first time in memory give a really big tick up to our back line that just seems so solid. It's really good to see. I'm so used to Collingwood having really flimsy backlines. I know a couple of years ago everyone was saying that we were in trouble. We needed a really big key defender or would never win a premiership. And I know we haven't won one yet, but I think you could look at our backline and say that it is very, very solid. Forgotten one. Jack Crisp is the person I've forgotten. How could I forget Jack Crisp? What an absolute star. Like, realistically, the fact that he has become such a good player when we didn't really think too much about him with the Beams trade is just a testament to who he is as a player. I think he is the most reliable player we have in our team. So I can't talk about the back line without mentioning how well Jack Crisp was playing. So I know watching the broadcast yesterday, and I'm curious whether or not other people have this same belief that I have, that the Channel 7 coverage was talking a lot about how we had some clear difference in the way that we were using the ball, and they talked about us being a little bit more direct and like that. And I have to say that I disagree. I really think that we have some big problems with the way that we're using it. And we were over handballing. We were handballing in situations where we were just handballing to someone and hoping, at times we would handball it to space. But I remember at one point in the midfield, I think it was in quarter two, it was about 5 or 6 handballs in a row, and then the ball got out to Travis Varco, and he sort of turned and just handballed it straight into one of the Hawks players. There was like a pack of them all around. And I think that's something that we need to really think about. I think that's something that needs to change. And I really like the way that there are a few different players in there. And I'm going to talk about that with the mixing it up. But if we are to handball the way we are, we cannot play a slow game. We cannot be a slow team that is handballing it continually. The amount of pressure that other teams game, it will just get locked down. And I think that's exactly what happened with the Essendon players, that we just got overpressured. That we would try and handball it and they would. Yeah. And in sometimes you just need to have good kicks around the ball. I think something that I'll mention as one of the big wins of the year, I wonder if you've noticed it as well, but we have Taylor Adams who has come in and improved his kicking out of sight. I would have said Taylor Adams had the ability to be an elite mid, apart from one thing, and that one thing was his. I think his kicking is out of sight this year. I think that he is hitting targets, he's kicking goals. I don't know if he's taking a bit more time with his kicks. I don't know if he's thinking his way through a little bit more. I know in the past that when Taylor tries to cross the field with a kick, it's pretty much almost a guaranteed goal against us. But now I don't feel that. I think that with that improved kicking, he has the potential to be a elite midfielder in the game. And it's interesting, if you look through Adam Treloar, who had a fantastic night in terms of disposals, same thing. If he can improve his kicking, you could say he'd be the best midfielder in the game. And when you talk about our ball use, maybe that's why we've had such issues with handballing, because we've had midfielders in there that aren't the best kicks. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with mixing it up. A couple of changes that Bucks made last night that maybe addresses that a little bit. So with 3 changes, a couple of them forced, one not forced, there was no doubt there was always going to be some changes that were happening. And I know I'll talk through a few of them, but some of the more obvious ones, apart from Travis Varco playing off the halfback flank, was clearly getting Jamie Elliott into the midfield and also giving Jaden Stevenson more of a role around the ground. And I'll talk about Jamie Elliott first. I think he had an absolutely stellar game last night. And I don't think he scored a goal. I know he hit the post really close to one kick and might have had a shot from outside 50 on the boundary and didn't quite make the distance. But in traffic, his hands, his sidestep, and his delivery was fantastic. So if he can build the tank to be able to play quite a bit of time in the midfield, I think that's a weapon for us. I think one of the things that Jamie has that some of our other midfielders that I spoke about earlier struggle with is good delivery. I trust his kick. I trust his ability in decision making, that if he has the ball, he's going to hit the target. And you see that, I don't know if you've noticed it, but when Elliott has the ball outside 50 and there's a lead up target, he always hits it. He's a really, really good kick. So I think if we can get Elliott into the midfield a bit more, I think that he offers us something a little bit different. The only player that I would say is similar to him, or maybe two, you could talk about, I forgot, Dacos. Dacos is a person. Dacos and Callum Brown, that kind of slider, quick movement, quick agility players. They're the 3 that you could say that when in traffic have the ability to dodge one way, break through, and I think that was a big win for us. So I'm looking forward to Elliott spending a bit of time in the midfield. I feel like if I was to compare him to someone, I'd like to see him play a bit like a Robbie Gray from Port Adelaide. I think he has the X factor. I think he has the ability to beat people one-on-one, and I think he has the ability to do what other players don't. So I know in the past we've seen him more like almost like play like a full forward, but I feel like there's the potential for him to go in there, maybe only 30-40%. And he did some pretty good work with the clearances last night as well. So I'd like to see his ability with the contested ball. It might be a really cool thing that we just found out about Jamie Elliott, given that he's probably in there because of Goey being out suspended, missing a week. The other clear change was Jaden Stevenson just being given free roam to run up and down the field, and we saw him in the back 50 quite a bit. And I thought this was interesting. When Stevenson was drafted, this is quite a while ago, I always thought that he was going to end up more as a wing, half forward wing kind of player. And I think given his ability to kick goals in his first few seasons, I wonder if we have stifled that a little bit. I wonder if we haven't seen his ability to run up and down the wings because we needed him to be down there, getting marks on the lead. And the thing I like about what we did with Jaden Stevens last night is that we took away the need for him to score goals from his ability to play a good match. I think for a young player who is not, a power forward or not a crumbing forward, to be judged purely on the amount of goals he's kicking can be a bit dangerous. And I thought it was good to see Stevenson using his speed, using his ability to run, using his kicking ability as well. Last night, I was a bit surprised with the quality of his disposal. I think a lot of his kicks, he just bashed it on the boot. But given, our reluctance to get the ball moving quickly, I wasn't too worried about that. And he seems to have a pretty big boot about him. He seems to be able to just kick the ball 50, 60 metres down the line. So I really hope that we continue with that. And I really would be interested to see him play some real serious time on the wing because we know how fast he is. I'm not sure about his tank, but I would assume that he has the ability to run all day. And in that way, it might be just an extra feature. I think this year Tom Phillips is not having the best year that he's had. I think he's really out of form, and I think in other years he might be at threat of being dropped. So maybe Jaden Stevenson onto a wing would be something that we could do to try and mix it up a little bit and develop his game as well, because I think he has the ability to beat people on the lead early. And at the moment, when he's playing as a forward, he relies on really good delivery. And we have not been playing well in the midfield the last few weeks. So a lot of talk about how he's good early. Well, Collingwood are good early. We kick early goals. We dominate their centre early. And then after that, we're getting stagnant. We're not winning centre clearances and we're not getting the ball forward. So you can't really blame him for not having an impact when we're not having an impact as a team. So I like that move. I like the move of Jamie Elliott. I am curious to see how Varco's form go. Last week against Essendon, I thought it was pretty poor. I thought he had a pretty terrible game, and I thought maybe there were signs that he was starting to get a bit slow. But this week he played really well, so I'm curious to see how we go against the Cats next week because, well, was it Hawthorn being really bad or was it Collingwood being really good? I'm kind of like sitting in the middle at the moment, so we'll have to see. My last thing to talk about before I finish off this first 20-minute podcast. It's not bad. 20 minutes is okay. Brayden Maynard. Probably my favourite player at Collingwood at the moment. I think he's having an absolute stellar of a season. I would say if Pendles was to decide that he's had enough as captain, I think it probably would go to Taylor Adams. But I think Maynard would be worth considering because he's going to give everything. On a day where Collingwood just don't show up and we're getting, kind of like versus Essendon, we're getting done. That Braden's going to have a go. That he's going to be in there. He never gives up. And I really love the fact that every time you zoom in, or not me personally, but every time the TV broadcasters zoom in on him, he looks buggered. He looks buggered because he's just absolutely run himself into. When he gets the ball, what a kick he is. Fantastic. His delivery is always brilliant. He kicks it so far. He doesn't sit back. He doesn't chip it around. I think we have to start to think that maybe Brayden Maynard could be a potential captain of the football club. He wouldn't be my first pick, but still, I think it's worth considering. I guess one last thing before I sign off. Rupert Wills had a really good game last night. And I'm not a huge fan of his. I think that his disposal is not up to the standard. And I think that he can be a little bit slow at times. But last night was the first time I saw him breaking away. And I know that there's been a lot of footage of him just doing little small dinky handballs. And I feel like Braden Sire is a better disposal of the ball when it comes to using his hands. But last night was the first time I've looked at Rupert Wills and gone, hey, I think there's a position there for him. And it's not just looking at his possessions, because I know that we over-possess the ball. I think that Trelaw had a pretty average night last night, despite getting 35, because he just little flicky handballs that look like throws, kicks that hit the ground, and things like that. But yeah, I'm willing to admit that maybe I was wrong with Rupert Wills. Maybe there is a bit of potential there. I think moving against the Cats, one of our big problems, I think Mason Cox is a problem. I know that the club are going to stick by him, but I think his inability to catch or his inability to mark really easy marks at the moment is really hurting our team. I know he brings the ball down, So I feel like, that is still a plus for us. But if he is not marking simple marks, there is a problem at AFL level. I feel like that's something they're going to have to consider. I assume at training he clunks everything, but we are seeing time and time again him get two hands to the ball with very little pressure and just drop it. And given that defenders know that if they put any pressure on his body, that he usually runs off the line of the ball and things like that, we can't rely on free kicks being the way that he scores. So I feel like in our team, if I was to put some pressure on any player in there, well, I'll choose three. I think Mason Cox has a bit of pressure on him. I think Tom Phillips, I don't expect him to be dropped, but I feel like he's out of form and there is a bit of pressure on him. And Callum Brown, I think, has been down for a couple of weeks. So I hope that, he is a player that I think that we definitely need to stick with. But I feel like, he needs to improve his output a little bit more. He needs to get a little bit more of the ball, or at least putting on a bit more pressure around the ball. So probably a few. I'm expecting a tough match against Geelong next. It's going to be an exciting match. I was surprised to see Geelong win against Brisbane because I actually tuned out at halftime and Brisbane were easily on top. Saying that, Hawthorn are a team that we usually struggle against. Geelong are usually a team that we match up well against. I'll go in there pretty confident. Hopefully we put one up over the Cats. All right, let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the match this week. Let me know. Criticize my comments. Tell me that I'm wrong. I don't really care. Let me know your thoughts about what a good name for the podcast could be and whether there is a need for a 20-minute kind of review podcast of Collingwood matches. Thanks for listening. You're all legends. Take it easy.